Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and this is a very heartbreaking edition of breaking news for Friday, February 21st, 2025. As heartbreaking as the news was yesterday, namely when the four coffins of the Israelis who had been murdered by Hamas were brought by the Red Cross and taken into Israel, which were supposed to be three members of the Bibas family, a young mother and her two children. It does not compare with the events that have followed. We talked about yesterday being a day of heartache and mourning and anger in Israel. Well, that's grown infinitely since yesterday. Now, we have five headlines that are going to explain it all, as well as where we're at right now. And please bear with me. I'm actually numb. It's about 4:20 in the morning here, Southern California, doing this story. I'm going to give you the latest and bring it up to date. Uh, the events will be self-explanatory, so please bear with me. I'm trying to get through this. All right, the day yesterday started with this first headline, which we gave you, with the bodies of the slain hostages were brought to Israel after a grotesque Hamas ceremony, 503 days since they were abducted. This is from the Times of Israel. Now, we didn't know about the grotesque ceremony because the Israeli media did not show it. This only came out later. But the caskets that were said to hold the body of Shiri Bibas, the young sons, Ariel and Kfir, and Oded Lifshitz were handed over to the Red Cross. Then the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, they were driven through Israel to the Forensic Institute for the identification process. They were believed to be the four slain Israeli hostages that were returned to Israel Thursday morning, 503 days after they were abducted from their homes and dragged to Gaza on October 7, 2023, by Hamas-led terrorists. Hamas had earlier said in the week that it was handing over the bodies of Shiri Bibas, her two young sons, Ariel and Kfir, Oded Lifshitz, who was 83 at the time of his abduction and murder. All four were taken alive from their home in Kibbutz near Oz, near where the Hamas-led invasion took place and massacre in southern Israel. The bodies were transferred to the Red Cross about 9:30 a.m. in a propaganda-filled ceremony in the Bani Suhila area of southern Gaza's Han Yunis, where the terror group set up a stage covered with propaganda posters in defiance of pleas for a more respectful affair. Now, this only came out later about what they had done. From there, the Red Cross handed the caskets over to the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, troops inside the Gaza Strip. And following a brief military ceremony, a convoy carrying the coffins, now draped with Israeli flags, crossed the border into Israel just before midday. Unlike recent hostage ceremonies in which the hostages were handed over to the Red Cross alive, most Israeli media outlets, including the Times of Israel, who's doing this story, we're giving to you, decided not to air the live footage from Khan Yunis out of respect for the dead. Now, as you can imagine, there was this initial outrage from Israel when the outrage at the beginning was, first of all, the Boss family's dead. There was hope until this last week that maybe they were still alive. So there's that heartbreak. But then there was initial outrage when it was discovered that the handover not only was not respectful, but rather a propaganda-filled event. Israel threatened retaliation for this grotesque ceremony that took place in Gaza while the four coffins were being handed over. Now, at this stage, the coffins had not been opened, the bodies examined to confirm their identities. Then, in the middle of the night, Israeli time, we have this shocking breaking news story, headline 2. Body returned by Hamas was not Shiri Bibas. The IDF declares serious violation as the remains of her two kids are positively ID'd. This is from the New York Post and it came out, during the afternoon here, late afternoon in the U.S., middle of the night in Israel. When the story broke, it was in the wee hours of Israel, and it seemed like something out of a horror movie. Upon examination, the coffin that was supposed to contain the remains of Shiri Bibas instead contained the body of an unidentified Palestinian woman. As the story began to circulate, the horror, outrage, and emotions were off the charts. How dare Hamas do something like this? Where is the body of the slain mother? Next, we had this sickening story that added to the horror. Headline number 3. The Israeli Defense Force now confirms that the two young children, um, Ariel Bibas and Kfir Bibas, ages 4 and 10 months, were brutally murdered in Hamas's captivity, as well as the third body not being their mother's. They were murdered in November 2023, 1 month after they were taken hostage. There was no Israeli bombing to where they were hidden. Their lives were taken by these evil individuals, and the unspeakable horror was now revealed. This, of course, caused even more uproar and anger among the Israelis. So today, Friday in Israel, it's Friday here of the Sabbath. Netanyahu spoke up. Headline number 4, Jerusalem Post, Hamas will pay the full price for not returning the body of Shiri Bibas. The cruelty of Hamas monsters known no bounds, he added. He said Friday morning they'll pay full price after it's confirmed that one of the slain hostage bodies returned by the terror group was not that of Shiri Bibas, as agreed to in the hostage ceasefire deal. Hamas will pay the full price of this cruel and wicked violation of the agreement, Netanyahu said. He also said the body of a Gazan woman was instead put in Shiri's coffin. Not only did Hamas kidnap the father, Yarden Bibas, the young mother Shiri, and their two small children, Ariel and Kfir, in an unspeakable manner, they did not return Shiri to her little children, her little angels, and instead put the body of a Gazan woman in a coffin, he said. Earlier in the morning, the IDF did confirm, like we mentioned, that the two hostage bodies among the four returned did belong to the young children, ages 10 months and 4. He threatened Hamas will pay the full price, whatever that means now. This is us talking. Sadly, he's made a number of threats like this in the past with really doing nothing substantial. What does he plan to do? What can he do is the problem. Okay, here's the issue. Tonight, the Sabbath begins in Israel, where everything basically shuts down. Tomorrow, during the Sabbath, 6 more hostages are supposed to be released noon Israeli time. Supposedly, nothing has changed. We don't know what's going to happen. But then we hear from Hamas, headline number 5. It says, again from the Jerusalem Post, they're surprised by the uproar regarding Shiri Bibas and they'll carry out their own investigation. It also said if it found Israel's results to be true, it would call for the return of the body that the occupation claims belongs to a Palestinian woman. First of all, they denied the claim that the body returned to Israel was not that of Shiri Bibas, saying was surprised by the uproar in an official statement today, Friday. Hamas is surprised by the uproar, by the occupation, and of the body that does not match the DNA test. The IDF confirmed on Friday morning the hostage remains released yesterday, like we said, did belong to the two young children. The third body was not that of the mother, and no match was found for any other hostage. It's an anonymous body without identification, the military stated. Hamas then admitted there was the possibility, quote, that an error or mix-up in the bodies, which may have resulted from the occupation's targeting and bombing of the location where the family was present, along with other Palestinians. Again, a lie from Hamas, but this is probably going to be the story they stick to. Hamas then claimed it would carry out its own investigation, would reveal the results. Like we said, Israel confirmed with forensic techniques this is not the body of the slain mother. However, Hamas claimed it would carry out this investigation, reveal the results, and if to be true, they called for the return of the body from the occupation, they said, of a Palestinian woman. It also rejected the threats made by Netanyahu following the news of the 3 returned hostages that they'd been murdered in captivity, and the body of Shiri was withheld, calling it part of his attempt, blaming Netanyahu to polish his image before his Zionist society within the context of internal Israeli disputes. Speaking of the hostage deal, Hamas said it's committed to its obligation, demonstrated by its conduct over the past days, and has no interest in failing to comply or in retaining any bodies in our possession. So here's the question. What happens next? Will there be another hostage exchange for Palestinian prisoners, including a number of murders? If so, if they do have this at tomorrow noon, then what's going to happen next? Obviously, these events have changed the dynamic. What's Israel going to do? What's the U.S. going to do? And we won't exactly know tomorrow until the final group of living hostages, the first phase, are supposed to be released. Now, there is a story that the group that took the Bibas family and the mother and the 2 children, at least, were a part of a Palestinian splinter group. We've mentioned this before. Hamas is the general term of these terrorists there in Gaza. But there are a number of splinter groups, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and this other small group that was named that supposedly took the Bibas family, and at least the mother and the 2 children, not the father. And evidently, this small group is the ones that did whatever they did to the young children and the mother just a month after the the initial captivity there in October of 2023. We don't know. We don't know what happened. We know this: the children were brutally murdered. We assume, of course, the mother was also. We'll probably never know unless there was some filming of it or someone who was there will confess to what happened. But it's beyond horrific. This situation is, like we said, as bad as it was yesterday with the start, because the heartbreaking first and foremost, because they had been the poster children, the two young boys and the mother of the hostages, and hopefully there was praying that they would be found, brought back unharmed. And then once known they were dead, that started the heartbreak. Then finding out later the ceremony that was there was just a macabre ceremony in Gaza that Hamas did, just celebrating the fact that you have, two young children and a mother murdered. And then they bring the bodies over, and then it's found that the body was not that of the mothers, but some unknown Palestinian woman, doesn't match any other Israeli hostages. And then we find later with the autopsy that the children were not killed by any bomb. They were brutally murdered by Hamas just a month afterwards. And then Netanyahu makes the threats, and then Hamas says, "Well, we didn't know this. We'll check it out. This was not our understanding." So here's where we're at right now. It's beyond horrible, the situation. And when I talked to David Tal, our Israeli friend, we'll be talking to him later today. Before all this happened, he was worried what Israel would do, even if the bodies were transferred, even if it was Shiri Bibas there. Now that this has happened, you can imagine the anger, the outrage, the threats. Well, anyway, we'll just see what happens. This is this is just off the charts, people. I'm sorry we had to report this, but this is where we're at right now. We're dealing with the evil. The good news is someday all wrongs are going to be made right. God's going to take care of this. He's going to judge these people, and we'll see what he does in this life, but they're not going to escape, believe me. There's coming a day they will have to stand before the Creator and basically be responsible for what all they did. Anyway, that's the story here. Anything huge comes up later today, we'll let you know. We'll break in, but most likely have to wait till tomorrow to find out what happens with the hostage, the final six hostages that ends phase one. We don't know if that's going to happen. If something else takes place, again, that's of any large interest, we will break in and do another edition of breaking news. And sorry, this one was so heartbreaking, but this is the world we live in. Good news is the Lord Jesus Christ is going to make all things new someday and right all the wrongs. But until that time, it's a tough world that we live in. I'm Don Stewart. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.